Take it off, Denise. Everybody here knows it's fake.
Her hand closed around my wife's wig.
Keisha, don't.
200 guests went silent.
Please.
My wife lowered her head, and the pale surgical line behind her ear caught the light.
See? What is that?
The reason I let you finish.
My name is Malcolm Reed. I spent 31 years as a fire captain before I retired, and if there is one thing that job teaches a man, it is this: the loudest room is never the most dangerous one. The dangerous room is quiet. The dangerous room smells like nothing at all, right up until it doesn't. 18 months before that wedding, Keisha Monroe walked into my kitchen carrying a pot of soup like she'd made it herself, though I would later learn she'd bought it from a place 2 blocks from her mother's condo and poured it into a dish that looked homemade. She set it on the counter and pressed her palm flat against her chest like she was moved by her own kindness.
"How is she today?" Keisha asked me.
My wife, Denise, had been out of the hospital 11 days. The aneurysm had come out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon while she was watering the tomatoes on the back porch. 11 hours of surgery, a scar behind her right ear that would never fully fade. Speech that sometimes stalled mid-sentence, the way a man forgets the next line of a hymn he's sung 1,000 times. "She's tired," I said, "but she's here." "That's a blessing," Keisha said. Then, softer, like she was worried about hurting me, "Does she still remember things, like dates and numbers and things like that?" I remember exactly how that question landed. Not loud, not suspicious on its face, just a young woman checking on her mother-in-law. But I had spent 3 decades reading rooms for smoke before anyone smelled fire, and something about the way she asked it, soft, careful, aimed, made the hair on my arms stand up. "She remembers plenty," I said. Keisha smiled. "Good. I just want to help however I can. Andre worries so much." Andre is my son. 34 years old, a real estate broker who'd built himself a life a long way from the fire station and the 2-bedroom house I raised him in. He loved his mother. I never doubted that, not once, not through any of it. But love and backbone are not the same muscle, and Andre had always been a little soft in the second one, the way boys can be when they grow up being told they're special before they've done anything to earn it. Keisha married my son on a Saturday in April, in a ceremony that cost more than my first house. I stood at the altar in a navy blue suit I'd had since Andre's college graduation and watched her walk down the aisle in white, smiling at everyone except, I noticed, except me. She had reasons not to smile at me. I was the one who asked questions. Denise came home from the hospital a different woman in some ways, and exactly the same woman in the ways that mattered. She lost words sometimes, nouns mostly. She'd reach for the word refrigerator and come up with the cold box instead, and laugh at herself before I could. She walked slower. She got tired by 4 in the afternoon most days, and she started wearing wigs because the hair around her surgical site grew back thin and uneven, and because, she told me this quietly one night in bed 3 months after the surgery, she didn't want people's eyes to go to the scar before they went to her face. "It's not vanity, Malcolm," she said. "It's dignity. There's a difference." I never said it was vanity. Keisha did, not to my face, but she said it to Andre, and Andre told me because he thought it was a compliment. He said, Keisha thinks you're brave for still caring about how you look. I remember the exact shape of my anger in that moment. Quiet, controlled, banked like coals. I did not raise my voice. I have never once raised my voice at my daughter-in-law, not through any of it. And there's a reason for that I'll get to. She's 29, I said. She doesn't know you yet. She doesn't want to know me, Denise said. She wants to know what I own. I didn't take that seriously enough, not at first. I want to be honest about that because pretending I saw everything from the beginning would be its own kind of lie, and I've had enough of those in my house for one lifetime. Denise's father had left her 40 acres outside Atlanta back in 1991, land that had been in his family since before anybody was writing checks for property like that. For years it sat there, half swamp, half pine, worth next to nothing on paper. Denise used to joke that her inheritance was a tax bill with trees on it. Then the Beltline expanded. Then developers started buying up anything within 20 minutes of it. Then a man in a gray suit knocked on our door one Thursday evening and told us, very politely, that the land my wife had been paying property taxes on for 3 decades was now worth somewhere around $3.4 million. Andre found out before I did. He worked in real estate. Of course, he found out first. It was practically his job to know these things. And I remember the night he came to dinner glowing about it like a kid on Christmas morning. "Mom, do you know what this means?" he said. "You could retire completely. Dad could stop doing those handyman jobs. This changes everything." Denise smiled and said something about maybe fixing the church roof first, and I laughed, and it was a good night. I want that on the record, too. Not every night in this story was a trap being set. Some of them were just my family, being my family, before things turned. But Keisha started asking about the land not long after that dinner. Small questions. Is it in a trust? Whose name is on the deed? Does Denise handle that herself, or does someone help her? Andre thought she was being a good daughter-in-law, thinking ahead for the family. I thought she sounded like a woman doing research. I found the first piece of paper by accident, the way you find most dangerous things, not looking for it, just present in the room when it surfaced. Andre had left his laptop open on our kitchen table one Sunday while he ran to his car for something, and a document was sitting right there on the screen, already scrolled to the signature line. A medical power of attorney. Denise's name, Denise's signature. Except it wasn't her signature. Not quite. I've watched my wife sign her name on birthday cards, mortgage papers, and get well cards for 40 years. She loops her D low and wide. Whoever signed this document looped it tight and high, like someone copying from a sample instead of writing from memory. I didn't say a word to Andre when he came back in. I have learned, in 67 years on this earth, that the moment you show your hand is the moment the other side starts hiding theirs better. I took a photograph of that screen with my phone in the 2 seconds I had before he closed the laptop, and I carried that photograph around like a burning coal in my pocket for the next several months. That night I told Denise what I'd seen. "That's not my signature," she said immediately. No hesitation, no confusion, nothing that looked like a woman losing her grip on reality. "I never signed anything for a medical power of attorney. I don't even know what that would be for. I'm not incapacitated, Malcolm." "I know." "Then why do I feel like everyone's already decided that I am?" I called Ruth Bell the next morning. Ruth had been our family's attorney for almost 20 years, ever since she helped us fight the city over a property line dispute that nearly cost us our first house. She was sharp, careful, and this mattered to me. She didn't scare easy. I showed her the photograph. She went quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that told me more than words would have. "Malcolm," she said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not confront anyone about this yet." "Ruth, that's my wife's name on a forged document." "I believe you. But if you go to your son right now, waving a photograph of a laptop screen, here's what happens. Andre panics. Keisha panics. Whatever original document exists, wherever it's filed, whoever notarized it, disappears or gets corrected before anyone official ever sees it. You'll have shown your hand for nothing." "So what do I do? Wait?" "You document everything. Every form, every conversation, every date. You let me quietly find out who notarized that thing and whether it was ever filed anywhere. And you protect Denise without announcing that you're protecting her. Can you do that?" I thought about my sister Angela. I think about her more than people know. I was 19 years old and 3 minutes too slow getting back into a burning house because I stopped to grab a jacket I thought I'd need. And those 3 minutes are the reason I became a fireman in the first place. And they're the reason waiting has never once come easy to me. "I can do it," I told Ruth. "But I want you to understand something. I am not a patient man by nature. I am a disciplined one. There's a difference." "That difference," Ruth said, "is exactly why I trust you to do this right." Over the following months, I watched Keisha do something I didn't have a name for until Ruth gave me one. Isolation, dressed up as care. It started small. Keisha told Andre that Denise shouldn't drive anymore, just until she's fully recovered, even though Denise's doctor had cleared her for driving 2 months after surgery. Then it was the phone. Keisha suggested Denise's cell plan be moved onto the family plan so someone can help her if she gets confused, which really meant Andre's name went on every bill and every account. Then came the lawyers. Denise mentioned once, over dinner, that she wanted to update her will now that the land was worth something. Keisha jumped in fast, warm as anything. "Denise, why don't you let Andre set up a call with our estate attorney? You don't want to deal with all that paperwork stress right now, not with your memory still healing." "My memory is fine," Denise said. "Of course it is," Keisha said, and reached over and patted her hand like Denise was a child who'd said something sweet but slightly wrong. I watched my wife's face in that moment, and I saw something I recognized from my own working life. The particular exhaustion of a person being quietly, politely disbelieved. That night, in our bedroom, Denise said the sentence that has stayed with me since. "I lost some words, Malcolm. I did not lose my mind." "I know that," I said. "Then promise me something. Promise me nobody gets to speak over me. Not Andre, not her, not even you trying to protect me." "I promise," I said. "Then I'll make sure nobody gets to speak over you." Ruth called me on a Tuesday evening in October with news that made my stomach drop the way it used to drop climbing a ladder toward a roof that might not hold. "The notary who stamped that power of attorney," she said. "Her name is Yvette Carr. She's currently under a state licensing investigation for a completely separate matter, a guardianship case involving an elderly man in DeKalb County. Different family, same pattern. Someone got him declared incompetent using paperwork Yvette notarized, without the man actually being present." You're telling me my wife's document might not have even had Denise in the room? I'm telling you the date on that power of attorney is the same date Denise had a physical therapy appointment 2 counties away. I checked the therapist's records myself. She has an alibi she doesn't even know she needs yet. I sat with that for a long moment. So who sent Keisha to this notary? That, Ruth said, is the question I don't have an answer to yet. But I will. 2 months before the wedding, Ruth found the second document, a request to change the beneficiary on Denise's life insurance policy, moving it away from me and into a trust that named Andre and Keisha jointly as controllers, with a clause that would give Keisha authority over disbursements in the event of the primary beneficiary's incapacitation. I want to be plain about what that meant. If something happened to me, if Denise ever needed that money for her own care, her own life, Keisha would have had her hand on the spigot. Has this one been filed? I asked Ruth. Requested, not finalized. Insurance companies move slow, thank God. But Malcolm, I need you to understand what this looks like when you put it all together. A forged medical power of attorney, a pending insurance change. And now, she paused, I found something else. Keisha has been in contact with a development company about an option contract on the Beltline land, contingent on proof that Denise cannot manage her own affairs. Contingent, I repeated. They won't move on the land unless someone with legal authority signs for her. And right now, the only person positioned to be that authority is Andre, guided by his wife. I sat in my truck outside Ruth's office for a long time after that call, not driving anywhere, just sitting with my hands on the wheel the way I used to sit outside a house before we went in, running through everything that could go wrong before I ever touched the door. Denise found out most of it before the wedding, because I have never believed in protecting my wife by keeping her in the dark. That's not protection. That's just a different kind of disrespect. I want the proof close to me, she told me one night. Not locked in a safe deposit box across town. Not in Ruth's office. Close. On my body. If they ever try to say I don't know what's happening to me, I want to be able to prove, right then, that I know everything. I thought about that for 2 days. Then I bought a needle and a spool of navy thread, the same color as my old dress uniform, though I didn't plan that. It's just what was in the drawer. And I sewed a slim pocket into the lining of the wig Denise wore most often, the soft brown one with the part just slightly off-center the way her natural hair used to fall. Inside it went copies, not originals. Ruth kept those, filed properly, dated, notarized, clean. Copies of the forged power of attorney. Copies of the insurance change request. A photograph, printed small, of Keisha walking into Yvette Carr's notary office carrying what turned out to be Denise's identification wallet, which Ruth's investigator had pulled from a different piece of footage entirely. And one handwritten note, in Denise's own hand, her real signature, wide loop and all. If this is found, Malcolm was right to wait. A woman should be allowed one secret pocket, Denise said when I finished sewing it shut. You've always had more than one, I told her, and she laughed for the first time in weeks. Keisha wanted Denise seated at a side table near the kitchen doors, so she can get up and rest without disrupting anyone if she gets tired. I refused, calmly, the way I refuse most things. I simply told the coordinator that Denise Reed, mother of the groom, would be seated at the head table, and I would be standing next to that seat until it happened. Andre pulled me aside the week before the wedding his tie already loosened, even though he wasn't wearing one yet. Just anxious in the way he'd been anxious his whole life before anything big. "Dad, can you just keep Mom calm at the reception? Keisha's stressed enough about the day going smoothly." "Your mother is calm," I said. "She's always been calm. I don't know when you started needing reminding of that." Andre didn't answer. He just looked at me the way he used to look at me as a boy, when he knew he'd said something wrong, but couldn't yet name what it was. And I recognized, with a coldness that settled right down into my chest, that my son had started speaking in his wife's sentences without noticing he'd stopped using his own. The reception was held at the Sterling Hall Conservatory, a glass-walled building on the edge of an old Atlanta estate, white flowers everywhere, chandeliers hanging like something out of a magazine neither Denise nor I had ever subscribed to. 200 guests, string quartet, a cake that probably cost more than my first truck. I wore my navy suit. Denise wore the brown wig with the off-center part, and a soft lavender dress that made her look, I told her in the car, exactly like the woman I married 41 years ago. "Flattery," she said, "will not make tonight easier." "It's not flattery if it's true." We were seated at the head table for exactly 40 minutes before Keisha decided the night belonged to her in a way she hadn't yet announced. You already know what happened next. You heard it at the start. "Take it off, Denise. Everybody here knows it's fake." I want to tell you what it felt like from inside that moment, because a video camera would have shown you a still, calm man in a navy suit, and it would have missed almost everything that actually happened in my chest. When Keisha's hand closed around that wig, every instinct I built over 31 years as a firefighter screamed at me to move fast, loud, physical. That is the instinct that gets people killed in burning buildings. The instinct to charge without a plan. I have trained that instinct out of myself so many times that by the time Keisha pulled, my body had already decided, before my mind caught up, to stay still and watch the room instead of the wig. The wig came free. Denise's scar caught the light. And for 1/2 of 1 second, I hated myself more than I have ever hated anyone else at that table. Because my wife was exposed in front of 200 strangers, and I did not immediately go to war for her. Then I saw it. The small blue rectangle dislodged from the lining, sliding loose and landing face up on the white tablecloth. I saw Judge Samuel Whitaker's face change 3 tables away. Sam and I had known each other since a fire investigation 20 years back, a case where his court needed my testimony on an arson pattern, and we'd stayed friendly the way 2 disciplined men sometimes do. Respectful distance, occasional dinner, mutual understanding that neither of us would waste the other's time. He recognized the blue seal on the corner of that envelope before anyone else in the room did, because I'd shown him a copy of it 3 weeks earlier over coffee, warning him only that something might come up at the wedding, and asking him, as a favor, to simply be present. "What is that?" Keisha asked, and for the first time all night, her voice cracked at the edges. "The reason I let you finish," I said. "Dad, what is that?" Andre asked, staring at the envelope like it was a snake on the tablecloth. "Something your wife should have left alone," I said. Keisha's composure, and I will give her this, her composure was genuinely remarkable, the kind of thing that made me understand exactly how she'd fooled my son for 2 years, cracked only slightly. "Malcolm planted that. He's trying to ruin our wedding. He's trying to ruin me.
He has hated me since the day Andre brought me home."
"I haven't touched that envelope tonight," I said. "I haven't touched your side of this at all. You did that yourself, Keisha, when you decided to pull a wig off a 64-year-old woman in front of 200 people." I turned to Carla Benton, the wedding coordinator, who was standing frozen near the head table with her earpiece still crackling. "Carla," I said, "does this venue keep security footage of the bridal suite hallway?" Carla hesitated exactly as long as it took her to understand what I was actually asking.
Yes, we do."
"I'd like you to pull today's footage, before the ceremony, the hallway outside the bridal suite." Keisha laughed, but it came out thinner than her first laugh had.
"This is insane. You're accusing me of something with hallway footage from my own wedding."
"I'm not accusing you of anything," I said. "I'm asking a question. If the answer clears you, it clears you." It took 11 minutes for Carla to return with a laptop and a security guard who plugged a small drive into it right there at the head table, in front of Judge Whitaker, in front of Andre, in front of roughly 30 guests who had stopped pretending not to watch. The footage showed the hallway outside the bridal suite, time-stamped 4 hours earlier. Keisha in her wedding morning robe, slipping into Denise's dressing room while Denise was down the hall getting her makeup touched up. Keisha at Denise's purse. Keisha's hand coming out with a small leather wallet, the one that held Denise's driver's license, her insurance card, the identification a notary would ask to see. Denise's voice, quiet but clear, cut through the silence at the table. "I did not ask you to help me disappear." Keisha's eyes went to Andre. "I was going to give it right back." "I thought her purse looked heavy. I thought I was helping." "You don't take a woman's identification to help her," Judge Whitaker said. It was the first time he'd spoken all night, and his voice carried the particular weight of a man who had spent 30 years on the bench learning exactly how much authority to put behind a single sentence. "You take it to use it somewhere she isn't." "Do you want to speak for yourself?" I asked my wife. It was the only question I asked her all night. Everything else I let happen around her. But that one, I needed her to answer out loud in front of everyone, because I had promised her months earlier that nobody would ever speak over her again, including me. "Yes," Denise said, and stood up slowly, one hand briefly on the table for balance, the scar behind her ear still visible, still catching the light, and she did not reach for the wig on the floor to cover it. She let it stay uncovered. She did not give a smooth speech. She paused twice, searching for a word the way she still sometimes did. And once she said, The paper. The paper with my name on it that wasn't my writing," instead of the forged document, because that was the word available to her in that moment. But every sentence she built was clear, and every date she gave was exact. "I had brain surgery on the 14th of March, she said. 11 days after that, Keisha brought me soup and asked if I still remembered numbers. 5 months after that, a form appeared with my name on it, signed on a day I was 45 minutes away at a physical therapy appointment with 3 witnesses. 3 months ago, my husband found a document on a laptop trying to move my life insurance where I never agreed for it to go. This morning, someone took my identification out of my purse without asking me." She looked at Keisha directly. "You have called me confused in front of my son for a year and a half. I am not confused. I have simply been quiet, the same way my husband has been quiet, because we were waiting for you to run out of paper to hide behind." "This is elder paranoia," Keisha said, her voice sharper now, the polish finally starting to slip. "You're 64 years old and you had brain surgery, and you're standing here accusing me of a conspiracy." I raised my voice for the only time that entire night, and even then, only slightly. "No," I said. "Paranoia guesses. Evidence remembers." I had asked Ruth to wait in the parking lot, on standby, in case the night went exactly this way. She walked into Sterling Hall 11 minutes after Carla pulled the footage, carrying a folder thick enough that Andre visibly paled at the sight of it. "Mr. Whitaker," Ruth said, nodding to the judge, who nodded back like they already understood each other. "I'm Ruth Bell, the Reed family's attorney. I want to lay out exactly what we've documented over the last 18 months, because I believe this family, and frankly this room, deserves clarity rather than more theater." She laid it out plainly. The forged power of attorney, tied to a notary currently under state investigation for an unrelated guardianship fraud case in DeKalb County. The insurance beneficiary change, requested but not yet finalized, that would have handed Keisha and Andre control over funds meant for Denise's care. And the land option, a contract with a development company, contingent entirely on Denise being declared unable to manage her own affairs for a parcel of Beltline-adjacent property now valued at $3.4 million. "How did you find a notary connected to an active fraud investigation?" Judge Whitaker asked Keisha directly. "Unless someone directed you to her." Keisha's eyes moved, just once, to her mother, Evelyn Monroe, who was sitting very still at a nearby table with a face gone the color of the tablecloth. "Mom," Keisha said quietly, "don't." But Evelyn had already started gathering her purse, already started calculating an exit, and that told the room everything it needed to know without another word being spoken. I had one more piece of evidence, and I had genuinely hoped, right up until that moment, that I would never have to use it. Ruth's investigator, the man who had been quietly working the wedding all evening with a professional camera, whom everyone assumed was simply the hired videographer, because that was exactly the cover Ruth and I had arranged for him, had recorded months earlier a voicemail Andre left for Keisha by accident, dictating a text message through his phone that got saved as an audio note instead of sent as words. Ruth had obtained it legally through a subpoena tied to the insurance investigation, and she asked my permission before playing it. I gave it. Andre's own voice filled the room, tired and guilty from a night 4 months back. "I don't know, babe. It just feels wrong keeping stuff from my dad like this. He raised me better than—" Then Keisha's voice, calm, coaching. "Guilt is just how parents keep ownership of adult children, Andre. You're allowed to build your own life." I watched my son's face while that recording played. I watched him hear, for the first time from the outside, exactly how he'd sounded. A grown man being talked out of his own conscience, one soft sentence at a time. Something in him seemed to fold inward. "I let you turn my mother's illness into an inconvenience," he said. "Not to me, not even really to the room, to Denise. I called you dramatic. I told the coordinator to seat you by the kitchen. I did that." Denise didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was steady. "An apology is not a bridge, Andre. It is the first board." Keisha's composure finally broke all the way, and what came out from underneath it was, in its own way, the most honest thing she said all night. "You think I wanted this life?" she said. loud enough now that the string quartet had stopped playing without anyone telling them to.
You people act so proud of your little house and your little pension. Meanwhile, you're sitting on $3.4 million in land you don't even know how to use.
Andre deserved better than being raised poor by a man who thinks a fire captain's pension is something to be proud of. Nobody said anything for a long moment. I didn't need to. She had just told 200 witnesses exactly what her marriage to my son had actually been about. The investigator, Ruth introduced him then formally as Marcus Oho, a licensed private investigator retained by Ruth's firm, stepped forward with photographs and timestamps documenting 3 separate meetings between Keisha and a development company representative over the preceding 4 months, each one held without Denise present, each one with Keisha presenting herself as, in his words, the family's decision-maker for Mrs. Reed's affairs. Ruth put the developer's representative on speakerphone right there at the table. He confirmed it without hesitation, clearly unaware yet of how badly this reflected on his own company's diligence. She told us the mother-in-law wasn't mentally competent to negotiate. She said the son and daughter-in-law had authority. "Did she ever let you speak to me directly?" Denise asked the phone. There was a long pause on the other end. "No, ma'am, she didn't." Silence answered the rest of the question, all by itself. Security escorted Keisha out of Sterling Hall a few minutes later, still in her pastel pink reception gown, her neat bun coming loose at the edges for the first time all night. She tried to pull Andre toward the door with her, one hand gripping his sleeve. Andre, we're leaving, now." Andre did not move. I didn't smile. I want to be honest about that, because a story like this can tempt a man toward a kind of triumph that doesn't actually belong here. There was no triumph in that room. There was a broken wedding, a humiliated mother, a son standing in the wreckage of 2 years he'd have to spend a long time making sense of, and a woman being walked out of a building in front of 200 people who would talk about this for years. "That is the first honest choice you made tonight, son," I said to Andre, quietly. And that was all I said. We drove home a little after 11 that night, Denise still in her lavender dress, the wig sitting in her lap instead of on her head. I helped her out of the car, into the house, and in our bedroom I helped her ease the last pins from what remained of her styled hair. She looked at her own scar in the mirror for a long moment. "Were you ever ashamed of it?" she asked. "Not tonight. Ever. That scar," I told her, "is the receipt for every morning I still get to wake up beside you." She didn't say anything back. She didn't need to. Some sentences are meant to just sit in a room for a while. Andre came back to the house alone about 3 weeks later on a Sunday afternoon, without calling first, which for him was practically an act of courage. He sat at our kitchen table, the same table where Keisha had once set down a pot of borrowed soup, and he didn't try to rush his own redemption, which I respected more than I expected to. "I liked feeling above you and Mom," he admitted. "I know how that sounds. Keisha made success feel like something I'd built myself, instead of something built on top of you two. I let her convince me that guilt about you was weakness in me." I didn't forgive him on the spot, and I want to be clear that this wasn't cruelty on my part. It was the same discipline Ruth had asked of me 18 months earlier. You don't hand out trust just because someone finally said the right words. You watch what they do next. "I'm not going to make this easy," I told him.
Not because I don't love you, because you need it to be hard, or you'll do this again with somebody else someday. What do you want me to do? There's a legal aid clinic downtown that helps elderly families navigate exactly what almost happened to your mother. Guardianship fraud, forged paperwork, families getting isolated by people who smell money before they smell love. You're going to work there. 1 year. No commission, no real estate deals on the side. You're going to learn up close what a forged signature actually does to a person who trusted the world not to do that to them. Andre didn't argue. Okay, he said. 1 year. Andre's first week at the legal aid clinic, he called me from the parking lot before he'd even gone inside. Dad, I don't know if I can do this. Nobody said you'd feel ready. Go in anyway. The case waiting for him that Monday was a 78-year-old widow named Miss Corinne Patterson, whose nephew had convinced her to sign over power of attorney just for the tax paperwork, and had since stopped answering her calls, closed one of her accounts, and moved into her guest room without her permission. Andre told me later that he sat across from her at a folding table in a church basement that served as the clinic's temporary office, and she looked at him with the exact same tired, careful eyes Denise used to have in those first months after the surgery. The eyes of a person who has learned that being believed is not something you can take for granted anymore. She kept apologizing to me, Andre said, for taking up my time. A woman who was being robbed in her own house, apologizing to me. Now you know what your mother felt like, I said. Every single day for 1.5 years. He didn't answer that. He didn't need to. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, and I let the silence sit there, because some lessons only take root if you don't rush to fill the quiet around them. Part 23. Denise's Recovery. Denise kept improving in the months after the wedding, though improving isn't quite the right word for what she was doing. She wasn't sick anymore. She was simply becoming, slowly and on her own schedule, more fully herself again. A self that had never actually left, just gotten quieter for a while under the weight of everyone doubting it. She started going back to her water aerobics class on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. She picked her phone plan apart line by line and put her own name back on every account Keisha had ever touched. She sat down with Ruth Bell of her own accord, no husband hovering, and rewrote her will exactly the way she wanted it written. With a clause Ruth added at Denise's specific request. Any future power of attorney would require 2 independent witnesses, a licensed physician's signed statement of competency, and Ruth's own notarized review, no matter who was asking or how urgent they claimed it was. I never want another family to be able to do to me what she tried to do, Denise told Ruth. Not even a family I love. Some evenings she'd sit at the kitchen table with her wig off, just her natural hair growing in soft and uneven around the scar, and she'd read the newspaper like nothing in the world had ever happened to her. Other evenings she'd put the wig on before dinner because she felt like it, the way another woman might put on lipstick, not to hide anything, just because she liked how she looked in it. I stopped keeping track of which nights were which. It stopped being information I needed. Part 24. The Divorce. Andre and Keisha's marriage did not survive the wedding reception, not in any way that mattered, even though the paperwork took another 9 months to catch up with what everyone already understood by midnight that night.
Keisha tried, in the early weeks, to paint herself as a woman who had simply been protecting her husband's interests, misunderstood by a family that never wanted her there in the first place. She said this to Andre over the phone more than once, according to Andre. But the footage from Sterling Hall existed. The forged document existed. The insurance filing existed. And Marcus Ojo's photographs of her 3 meetings with the developer existed, time-stamped and unambiguous, in a state where the guardianship fraud investigation into Yvette Carr was picking up speed by the week.
Andre told her, on what turned out to be their final phone call. I keep trying to find the version of this where you didn't know what you were doing. I can't find it, Keisha. I looked. She didn't argue with him. He said that surprised him more than anything else she'd ever said. That in the end, she didn't even bother denying it to the one person she'd spent 2 years convincing. Part 25. What happened to Keisha? Ruth kept me updated on the parts of it that touched our family directly, though a good deal of what came after belonged to the state, not to us. Yvette Carr lost her notary license permanently, and the guardianship fraud case in DeKalb County that had first put her under investigation eventually widened to include the paperwork she'd notarized for Denise.
Keisha was never criminally charged. Ruth had told me from the start that elder financial exploitation cases often move through civil courts and licensing boards rather than criminal ones, especially when the money never actually changed hands. But 2 separate filings now sit permanently in Georgia's public records with Keisha Monroe Reed's name on them. Findings of attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Any family who does their homework before letting her into their lives will find those filings in under a minute. I heard secondhand that she moved to Charlotte about a year after the wedding. I don't know much more than that, and I stopped asking. Ruth once told me something that stuck with me. Some people don't need a prison sentence to live with what they did, Malcolm. They just need enough time alone with it. I believe that's likely true of Keisha. I've made my peace with not needing to watch it happen.
Evelyn Monroe, for her part, sent one letter to our house about 4 months after the wedding, addressed to Denise. Denise read it twice, folded it back into its envelope, and never told me every word of what it said. She told me only this much. She apologized for something. I'm not certain she apologized for the right thing. Denise kept the letter in a drawer. She never answered it, and Evelyn never wrote again. Part 26. 1 year later. A year after the wedding, part of Denise's Beltline land, not sold to any developer, not turned into the kind of project Keisha had once imagined controlling, became the site of a small community legal aid office and a garden that neighborhood kids helped plant every spring. Ruth Bell helped set up the nonprofit board. Judge Whitaker, retired but not idle, agreed to consult on cases involving elder guardianship fraud. The very thing that had almost taken my wife's autonomy away from her in front of 200 wedding guests. Denise gave a short speech at the opening. She still paused sometimes, searching for a word. Nobody in that crowd flinched at it anymore. She wore a wig that day, the same brown one, the lining empty now of everything but the memory of what it once held. Some days since then she's worn it. Some days she hasn't. She told me once that the choice itself was the whole point. A year ago, she told the small crowd gathered under a tent by the garden beds, someone pulled something off my head in front of 200 people to prove I was weak. Today I'm standing in front of you with nothing hidden, and I have never felt stronger in my life. People clapped. I didn't. I just stood at the back in my navy suit, the way I always do,
watching the room instead of the stage. Because some habits a man never fully sets down. We framed the blue envelope. Not the copies that had done their work in the courtroom filings and the state investigation. Those stayed with Ruth, evidence in a case that closed quietly, the way most fraud cases involving elderly victims do, without headlines, without hashtags, just paperwork correcting itself and a family finding its footing again. We framed a blank duplicate of the original envelope, empty, hung in our hallway, right where you see it when you first walk through the front door. Not as trauma, as proof. Andre finished his year at the clinic and asked to stay a second one. I let him. He tells me now that the hardest part of the work isn't the paperwork. It's sitting across from an 80-year-old man or a 70-year-old woman and watching them realize, slowly, in real time, that someone they trusted had already made up their mind about them. He says it reminds him of a wedding he'd rather forget and can't stop learning from.
Part 27. Andre's second year. By his second year at the clinic, Andre had stopped being the son who showed up out of obligation and started being, in Ruth's words, genuinely good at the work. He learned to spot a forged signature almost as fast as I could. He learned to sit with a frightened old man for an hour before ever mentioning the word attorney. He started keeping a small notebook, the kind I used to carry on calls back when I still wore a different uniform, and he wrote down every family he helped, first name only, like a man keeping a private ledger of debts he was slowly paying down. He asked me, near the end of that second year, whether I thought his mother would ever fully trust him again, the way she had before Keisha. "She trusts you," I told him. "Trust doesn't mean forgetting. It means she's decided the man standing in front of her now is worth building something new with." "That's not the same thing as pretending the old thing never happened." He nodded slowly, the way a man nods when he's finally ready to hear something, instead of just agreeing to make the conversation end. People sometimes ask me why I didn't stop Keisha's hand before it ever touched that wig. I've turned that question over more times than I can count, usually at night, usually with Denise asleep beside me and the scar behind her ear catching whatever light comes through the blinds. Here's what I've come to. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is how you keep the person you love safe until the truth is strong enough to stand on its own, in front of everyone, without you having to hold it up. My sister taught me that lesson the hard way, decades ago, in a fire I got to 3 minutes too late. I have spent the rest of my life making sure I am never 3 minutes too late again, even if, sometimes, being on time looks like standing perfectly still. Denise still teases me about the navy thread. She says I've been wearing some version of that uniform color for 40 years, long after the department stopped requiring it. And she's not wrong. I suppose a man holds on to the colors that remind him what he's actually protecting. The garden by the legal aid office is doing well this year. Denise planted tomatoes again, same as the ones she was watering the day the aneurysm first found her. She says there's something almost funny about that, planting the same thing that was in her hands the day everything changed. I don't think it's funny. I think it's the bravest kind of ordinary there is. Going back to the thing you were doing before the world tried to take it from you, and doing it again anyway. Tell me in the comments, have you ever stayed quiet because speaking too soon would have ruined the truth?